Welcome back. So in this episode, I am going to be talking about how to not look for pain. Not how do I put it? Don't look for hate. Trust me, you'll find it soon enough, or I should say, it's going to find you. So that's one of the things that again I've noticed in society and in especially on like Facebook and on other social media sources. And anyhow, it's just to this point where, and again, I don't necessarily go on all these things, so I can't confirm it, but just there have been some discussions I've seen where it almost seems like people are trying to find a mine in a minefield, like they're trying to hit it with a hammer, and it's just one of those things where I do feel like life is full of landmines. Eventually you're going to get hit by one or two or 10. But I certainly would say not to go out looking for them. It's one of those things where, I've seen people who, I said there's, I think it was the first lady offered some school, some books or whatever. I can't remember exactly the details, but it was something along the lines of she was trying to see if this one school wanted some Dr. Seuss books or something. And the lady ended up like lecturing her about how Dr. Seuss books are racist and sexist, and I've actually come across a couple of books where I am kind of, oh my gosh. But it's just one of those things where, there's real freaking hate out there. There's people out there and again, if you don't want to read those books or whatever, I get it. If you don't want to support that, fine. But it's just the fact that like, I feel like, people hear, a car backfire and they just assume that there's a shootout and they're just waiting for it. They're ready for it. They want it. And again, it's just one of those things where it is out there. There are people out there who are real racist, who are real sexist, but it kind of seems like, I remember a Key and Peele skit where they were specifically saying this, where the office executive asked these three employees to come in, and he's trying to tell them something, and every time he goes to say it, one of them gets upset and gets defensive and says, "Oh, you need to explain to me because I'm a woman, or because I'm gay, or because I'm black, or whatever." And they subjugate everything he goes to try to say as being this source of hate. And the hilariousness was that after all their defensiveness and him trying to talk, he goes to say like a different type of racist joke, but none of the three people in the room were being represented, and they were completely interested to hear what the joke was. And so that's the idea, is that it's only offensive if it's about you. But what I'm saying is that there are really people out there who do have hate in their heart for demographics, for all of us. And so, I would just heed people or give them a warning not to go looking for it, because it is there. But that's one of the things I've seen with all these people. Is a lot of times I just can't imagine that they're happy people. Like, I can't imagine they're sitting at home just calmly having a healthy conversation with somebody that agrees with them, that supports them, with family or whatever, just because it just seems so. I just made an episode about addictions. I feel like that's their addiction. Their addiction is almost like mental abuse to themselves. And again, we could get into the analysis of why that is. I'm sure that there are probably some pretty interesting aspects, but I just wish people would self-reflect and realize, if you don't like guns, don't go to NRA.com, and expect to have a healthy conversation. It's one of those things where you're not gonna be happy. If you are a vegan, don't go into a steakhouse. If it's just one of those things where if someone's being there was one thing that really upset me, wasn't really upset me, but there was some story about how some guy was eating raw meat at a vegan festival, and it made me frustrated, because obviously I'm not a vegan, but it made me frustrated because it was this sense of like, I feel like I knew why he was doing it, even though I didn't read the article of if he ever said why he did it. But I feel like why he was doing that was he kind of probably got tired of being lectured about being a murderer because he eats meat, and his attitude probably is, I don't tell you to eat meat, so don't tell me to eat veggies. Like, it's kind of like live and let live. So I get the message. But again, this is one of those things that's escalating the issue rather than simply trying to do what you can to harmonize, to get along, to coexist. It's one of those things where, it's easy for us to, if we get attacked, to just attack someone else. But a lot of times, like I said, that's the negative type of cancer. I think we can have extremely strong and loving and compassionate personalities, and I think we can have hateful and spiteful personalities, and I think they're both what do you call it? They're both contagious. But sadly, I think being petty and jerky is a lot more contagious. And I think the biggest problem about those attributes is that if you are being a nasty person, a lot of the times you're going to continue that behavior because you're going to feel guilt. You might not admit it, and you probably won't admit it, but you're going to feel guilt for being a nasty person. And so you're going to internally have to justify to your mind why it was okay for you to be a jerk. And so again, you're never going to be identifying the problem, which is your behavior. And so you're never going to improve it. And so that's why, I think it's important, if it's not necessarily about being compassionate towards other people. I mean, for myself, and a lot of times it is, but also, when you're compassionate towards other people, you're not going to regret that. No one ever held the door for somebody, and well, I shouldn't say no one's ever held the door for somebody and then regretted it, because there's a certain level of, I've had that point where it's not that I regretted it, but I did. I held the door for somebody, they walked through and ghosted me and acted like I was a doorstopper or something. And it's like so many times where I see people who don't do that, who are extremely impolite. And so you'd think that if you saw someone being polite, you'd be kind of like, oh, sweet, there's another person. And so there is a certain level of regret in that aspect, but it's short-lived. Like I said, if I had held the door and then someone ghosted me and then I called them a name, I would regret calling them a name far more than I would regret holding a door up for somebody who's a jerk. It's just one of those things where immediately you might think, oh, I should have thrown it in their face. But the reality is internally you would have regretted it because you would have had to justify why you threw the door in their face. You would have had to constantly be like, well, because they were jerky to me. And if they're jerky to me, then I'm jerky to them. I'm not a jerk. And so again, if you have to justify something internally, a lot of the times it's probably the wrong decision. I'm not saying all the times, because sometimes we do just need to reflect and have clarity, because life is not simple in the least. But again, if we're going to be talking about how we're going to try to make the world a better place, a lot of times, I like how I say Michael Jackson's song "Man in the Mirror" summarized it. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself, then make a change. Because the fact of the matter is that the only person you have ultimate control over. We can influence people, but we don't ultimately control them. Some people have extremely strong influence on people and can, to a certain degree, control their actions because of mind manipulation and mental abuse that they may have been inflicted upon. But for the most part, ultimately, we're the ones who are controlling ourselves. And so it's important to make that distinction. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought with everything. Oh yes, don't look for hate. Because yes, it's just one of those things where it's there. It really is there. There are people who do burn crosses. There are people that have clan meetings and so forth, and they're the real horrible human beings. And so, if someone's got an issue with you, if your work ethic, or if they say something, like I said, it just seems like people want to hear the hate. It's like it's almost like their mental fuel. When in fact, like I said, though, I think a lot of it becomes with like I said, it's such an exhausting process because again, too, it was one of those things where, I feel like in many ways it's all like if you have a scab or something, you might want to pick at it because it like irritating the pain. I think I just thought about something. So imagine it's all like self-abuse in that like cutting, like people who suffer from mental unhappiness cut themselves. I'm not 100% sure because I've never done that to myself. But I imagine that a lot of it has to do with the fact that one, they don't feel like they deserve happiness. And two, that they're used to the pain. It's kind of how they self-identify. It's part of who they are. And so again, I feel like that's a lot of the reasons why a lot of people look out for racism and sexism. Is it that one, for some reason that they don't feel like they should be allowed to be happy. And sometimes I think that when people know people who aren't happy, when people know people who have been through severe, miserable, just never-ending pain, a lot of times when people don't have that in their lives, or they have it in a minor aspect, they feel the guilt of happiness. They feel the guilt of not having struggles. And so, like I'm saying, they're mentally inflicting they're mentally cutting themselves. And again, too, a lot of it, like I said, is maybe they're so used to being hurt that they're, again, inflicting pain on themselves because they're just so used to that abuse that it's just what they know. It's the world that they know. And so it's sad because, like I said, is that, if you consume so much of that negativity, if you're constantly looking for hate, for confrontations, and for people on the other side of the aisle, it's going to mentally deplete you. It's just going to drain the life out of you. And again, too, I can't imagine that you would have a very positive outlook on life, not being critical to that person and saying they're a bad person because they don't have a good outlook, but that, again, if you surround yourself with people who despise you, or that you think they despise you, again, you're going to think the world despises you because that's all you see. Again, that's the sad thing about all these differences of opinions and perspectives and positions on subjects, is that it's all derived from our own experiences and what we witness, and then the people we put around ourselves and what they witness. But that's it. And there's 7 billion people on the planet. Chances are there's a lot of perspectives you have no idea exist. And so, again, that's the thing. And I think that that's one of the benefits that we can have in this country, is that we do have that resource of so many different perspectives. And I certainly have. There have been times when, I say I really don't go on Facebook much at all these days. It's probably been almost 10 years that I went on any type of regular basis. Every now and then I might post something, or I might, scan through it to see if my loved ones and life, I say family and friends, have had kids or have gone on cool vacations or something, but I really don't go on it. But that was one of the things that kind of made me get off of Facebook, was that there was a time when I actually thought that there's just gobs of hate. I thought that, like, everyone was a tool. I thought everyone just had this malice malice hate in their heart. But that's the thing I realized, was that I was going down these rabbit holes of information. And it's like, well, that's all you're going to find. It's just one of those things where if you look for trouble, you will find it. But if you also look for peace and happiness, you'll find that too. And frankly, I'd rather find the latter. I'd rather fill my heart with something positive, because I know that the hate's out there. I know it exists. But it's just a matter, like I said, of I think there was this one, I don't know if it's a story, I don't know what you would call it, but anyhow, so there was this kid and his grandfather, and the grandfather's telling the kid that there are 2 wolves in every human being, and one is goodness and kindness and love and compassion and grace. The other one is evil and anger and hate and malice. And the kid asked the grandfather, which wolf, wins? Which wolf do you become? The grandfather says, the one you feed the most. And I think it's a very valid point. It's one of those things where, if there's love in your heart and there's hate in your heart, whichever one you feed more, you're going to eventually become. Or at the very least, you're going to look at life that way. You might not necessarily give in to your hate, but you certainly won't be thinking that the best of people. You certainly won't be in a mental state where you can contribute to the greater good, and for all of us to actually unite, to coexist, and to really live and let live. If you have this nature of I want to say hate, but thinking that the world is hateful, if nothing else. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to be actively flinging mud, but again, too, just a cynical point of view and constantly feeding that isn't going to be good for you or anybody around you. And so again, it's just one of those things where it's forgiveness. So forgiveness isn't about the person you're forgiving necessarily. A lot of times it's not, because especially a lot of times, especially if someone did something significantly horrendous in your life, that person, it doesn't deserve forgiveness. But the thing I've learned is the person that deserves forgiveness is the person forgiving the person who's been hurt. And then forgiving somebody isn't letting them off the hook. It's like the same principles of accepting something is not the same thing as approving it. Forgiving something is not the same thing as approving it. It's simply freeing yourself of the pain and the chains in which your mind becomes wrapped and burdened by. And that's just something that people need to, self-reflect and realize, if me hating somebody and not forgiving them, is it hurting them or is it hurting me? And it might hurt them. But a lot of times if someone's able to do something significantly painful, oh my gosh, I think my kids are, finish it up. If someone's able to do something significantly painful, do you really think that you holding a grudge to them is really going to hurt them? If they were able to hurt you in such a significant way, probably not. And so forgiveness, like I said, it's not about letting them off the hook. They still have to be held accountable. You're not approving of what they did, but you're freeing yourself of that pain. But as always, good luck and good night.